Welcome back. Protecting election integrity. President Biden is pushing the Senate to pass the sweeping H.R. 1 election reform bill. But Republicans are taking steps to protect the electoral systems in other ways. A new bill is being introduced that would halt election security grants until a state-by-state review of 2020 procedures from the Comptroller General is finished. This would also prohibit states from receiving grants if they used unconstitutional protocols. Joining me right now is the author of that bill, Tennessee Senator and member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Appropriations Committees, Bill Hagerty. It is great to have you this morning, sir. Thanks very much for being here. This is such an important topic, and I think one of the reasons that we are seeing so much upset around H.R. 1 and what Nancy Pelosi's priorities are in terms of changing the way we vote. Talk to us about, first, this movement and what you're hoping to accomplish.
Well, I think it's very telling, Maria, that the very first bill they pass after this COVID relief package, which that's a different story, but the very first bill that they seek to pass is this H.R. 1, the so-called For the People Act, which, like so many bills in Washington, is a misnomer. It's anything but for the people. It's for the politicians. What it is a Democrat attempt to basically lock in the power that they've just taken. They want to grab it forever and turn us into a single-party type of jurisdiction here in America. We've got to stand up against that.
So tell us how this H.R. 1 does this. Do you expect this to pass the Senate? Because we know that it has already passed the House, and in it are things like no ID at all to vote, mail-in ballots to be the standard, voting for potentially inmates and people as young as 16 years old. What is most egregious, in your view, about this so-called For the People Act, which is not for the people at all because they're federalizing elections, taking it out of the state's hands?
They're taking it out of the state's hands. They would have taxpayers in Tennessee, my home state, subsidizing the elections of politicians in New York. The Tennesseans want to be subsidizing AOC's election. They would federalize elections in America and force taxpayers to pay for them rather than forcing politicians to earn the support of folks in their own state. They would allow for ballot harvesting to take place, unlimited ballot harvesting. These are all the wrong incentives, and in fact, it loosens things even further, and it's going to so further damage America's confidence in our election system. That's why I put forward legislation to address this.
So do you have confidence that H.R. 1 will not pass the Senate?
Well, I'm going to fight every step of the way, and that's why I've offered a very practical alternative. Again, to restore America's confidence in the system, we need not be loosening the rules right now. We need to be making certain that the Constitution is followed. And I think H.R. 1 is an unconstitutional provision because it takes away the power from the state legislatures. That's what Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution clearly enumerates, that the authority for elections lies with elected state legislators who are responsible and accountable to people in their states, not with the federal government.
Yeah, I understand that. But if you don't get Democrats to agree with you, this could pass the Senate. I mean, do you feel you have Democrat support in that regard, or is this headed to the Supreme Court?
It's very hard to say right now, but it depends on whether the filibuster is abided by or not. I certainly don't think that you'll see 10 Republicans move over to the side of H.R. 1. I don't think you'll see a single Republican move in that direction. Again, this is clearly a power grab by the Democrats.
Yeah, I understand that, but do you think you'll have Democrat support to go against it?
I certainly hope so, Maria. I think that you have Democrats from states like mine and Tennessee that don't want to see this federalized, that don't want to put all of the authority and the outcome, frankly, of the elections in the hands of several very highly populous states. That's what that's what it's eventually lending itself to. This is going to damage the Electoral College.
So, Senator, you're also co-sponsoring legislation with South Carolina Senator Tim Scott to establish a bipartisan committee to review any procedural changes that happened in the 2020 election. If founded, what would you expect the committee to find?
Well, I think what they're going to find is that in several instances, the laws were changed to midterm, as the elections were underway. Unconstitutional actors stepped in, violated the United States Constitution, and took away the constitutionally granted authority that solely lies within the realm of state legislators. You had actors in the judiciary, you had actors in the executive branch, you had unelected commissions that basically stepped in and changed the rules midstream, and they've shaken America's confidence in our election system to the very core.
Well, I agree with you, Senator, and the question is, what do you do about it? I mean, now you can't even question if there were irregularities in the 2020 election. You'll get canceled or destroyed by social media. And there was never an investigation. Why weren't any of these issues truly looked at?
Well, that's what our legislation would do. It would force an examination of what took place in 2020. And to the extent the Constitution was violated, and I'm certain that we're going to find this in several states, to the extent there were constitutional violations, those violations would have to be corrected before a single federal dollar would ever go back to those states to support elections. And back in 2020, Congress sent some $825 million to the states to support elections at that point. This will create an incentive to behave according to the Constitution. That's what this aims to do, is put the right incentives in place to clean up what happened in 2020 and restore confidence in the American electoral system.
I think it's very smart. I'm glad you're doing it. Let me bring in Steve Forbes. Steve, we know how many questions there are around some of the practices around 2020.
Oh, absolutely. And surprised that we didn't get more real data on what actually happened in terms of shenanigans going on. But I want to ask the Senator, in terms of the filibuster, Joe Manchin's been making noises about maybe changing some of the procedures around the filibuster, or softening it a little bit. Are the Democrats, can you really preserve the filibuster? Or is Joe Manchin going to cave? Or are there other Democrats, like your colleague, Senator Sinema from Arizona, who will stand by and not let that happen? Because if you lose the filibuster, you're going to get H.R. 1.
You're right, Steve. But Senator Sinema, Senator Manchin have both been clear that they do not want to see the filibuster taken apart. I'm concerned about some of the comments that Senator Manchin has made recently, but we've got to maintain the filibuster if we want to have any sense of bipartisanship here in America.
And
do you think some of the Democrats quietly are in favor of the filibuster?
Exactly.
I've got to believe.
Well, that's a good question, Steve.
Maria and Steve, I think you're right. You've got to believe that Democrats realize that at some point the table is going to turn. Do they want to be on the other end of this? I think not. So they're going to have to think long and hard before they do any further damage to the process here. And I think the filibuster will stand.
So tell us about your proposed legislation and where it goes from here.
Well, we're working our way through right now. We're getting a lot more support. What we've got to do, though, is draw a clear focus on the fact that there were severe issues that arose in 2020. Again, what the Senate needs to do is talk to their constituents, that's Democrats and Republicans, to understand and appreciate the grave concerns. And this legislation would fix that and, again, make certain that the incentives are properly aligned so that no federal dollars go to states that violate the United States Constitution with respect to election laws.
Can you tell us what the new dealings in Georgia mean? Because I think Georgia is trying to do a similar move in that it is coming up with fixes for what took place in 2020. What's your take on the reliability and what we're seeing coming out of Georgia here?
I think Georgia is an example, and a very clear example, of states that are trying to go back and repair the damage that was done in 2020. Again, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution clearly puts constitutional responsibility on state legislatures to set forth the rules for elections in their state. That's what has to happen, and I'm glad to see states beginning to go back and repair the damage that was done in 2020, again, under the guise of a crisis, under the guise of a pandemic, but they went around the Constitution, and that's got to be repaired.
And you think we'll see more states do what Georgia did?
I do think so. I certainly hope so. And if my legislation passes, all the incentives will be in place to do that, because they'll be required to do that if they want to receive any federal support for their elections.
It's a very smart move. Senator, it's good to have you. We're going to keep following this legislation to see where it goes. Senator Bill Hagerty joining us this morning in